everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. And we're really excited today. We are talking with another director. We love talking with directors. And today we have Michael Litwak here. And he's the director of the new indie film, Molly and Max in the Future. And Michael, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So this is the first time you coming on the podcast. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got started as this your feature debut, how you ended up becoming a director.
Yeah, I grew up in Los Angeles, and I kind of knew from a very young age that I wanted to make movies, and they were kind of my first love, and the movies that kind of got me into filmmaking were Indiana Jones and Jurassic Park and Star Wars and kind of big budget action adventure spectacles. That's kind of what drew me into filmmaking in the first place. And then, as I got older, I kind of gravitated away from those very kind of plot heavy, action heavy movies and towards stuff that was a little bit more character driven, like romantic comedies, like When Harry Met Sally and Annie Hall and, Amelie and Y Tu Mamá También and movies that are about kind of normal people going through normal problems that for the most part take place in reality, but also, sometimes have very fun worlds or very fun stylistic flourishes in them. And I moved to New York to go to NYU, and I started just making short films and trying to figure out, where do I fit within the landscape of making movies and what kind of movies do I want to make. And just in the process of making a bunch of different films and trying to figure out what I liked and what I didn't like, I kind of realized that, I wanted to make movies that were a combination of everything that got me into filmmaking in the first place, but also everything that kind of kept me in filmmaking. And so I started making shorts and I made a bunch of shorts at NYU, and my NYU thesis film won some awards, and then that kind of got me representation and an agent and a manager, and I spent 7 years basically trying to get a movie off the ground after that. And I just had a lot of starts and stops and things almost happening and things that were going to happen that fell apart at the last second. And it was very frustrating. And I had another film that I had written that was a romance, and it was science fiction, action adventure, and it looked like we were going to put all the pieces of the puzzle together to get it made. And we set a date for June 2020, and then it was very much interrupted by COVID, and everything kind of fell apart after that. And so I kind of just went back to the drawing board and realized that, I wanted to make a movie that I knew I would be able to make, and I wanted to make something that that was kind of true to all of that, felt unique and interesting, and kind of scratched a lot of the itches of this kind of genre mashup combo that I found myself kind of gravitating towards. And so during the pandemic, I rewatched When Harry Met Sally, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I was really inspired by it, and it's such a simple story of two people kind of talking to each other, and yet it never feels boring. The characters are so good. And I just kind of thought about, what would you do if you wanted to make that movie again today, and how would you do it? And so this movie kind of started from like, how would you update When Harry Met Sally for a modern audience and make it unique and fresh and feel different at the same time.
Yeah. We're going to dive all into that, but why don't you tell the audience a little bit about the plot? I mean, you mentioned it's inspired by When Harry Met Sally, but why don't you tell them a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's it's a story of two people meeting each other over and over again over the course of 12 years. And that's really it in its simplest terms, but it takes place in kind of this science fictional universe where there's, everything's on the table. And so you have parallel universes, you have robot girlfriends, you have giant tentacle monsters, you have giant robot fighting. You and all of this world is kind of an expression of the characters, but really at its core, it's about two people who meet each other and who aren't really at the right time and right place in their lives to be supportive and helpful romantically, but they develop a friendship, and through that friendship they start to kind of fall in love with one another. And realize that, they can help each other grow into the type of people that are actually compatible with one another.
Mhm. Yeah, I know that this is an indie film, and I'm sure the budget wasn't huge, but still, I was watching it yesterday again and thinking, how the heck did you get this greenlit and get funding for this? Because as a first-time filmmaker, I mean, most of the time, first-time filmmakers are doing like a small horror movie in one house, or just something really, really simple. But to get something like this made for your first try, like I said, I just watched thinking, how did he do this?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was really tough, but basically the short answer is that me and the director of photography, Zach, we did all of the VFX ourselves. There was, maybe 10% of them we had someone else come
Uh-huh.
in and do a select little bit of it, but we spent about 18 months before we even shot the movie, kind of building all of the miniatures, designing the world, designing the sets, and shooting them and putting them together, and then you know, but we kind of just took our time with it. And because there wasn't a huge rush, we could, really just put a ton of effort and detail into every single location, and keep it with just us kind of doing, building everything, shooting everything, processing everything, and then compositing it all together. And so, it kind of started from this idea of like, what if we shoot an entire movie on green screen? And then a lot of first time features are, they take their friends and they go to a cabin and, they shoot a
Yeah.
horror movie or something. And like, I've had a lot of friends who've done that. And it's a great way to make a movie. I thought about doing that too, but I was trying to try to figure out like, how do I do my version of that small micro budget movie? And for me, it was like, oh, well, often it's about shooting in one location, because that one location is what allows you to kind of save time and money and energy. And with this, it was like, well, let's just make our location a studio and then turn that location into 50 different locations, using green screens and rear screen projection and LED stage. So, it was a really small movie. We only had 12 people that basically worked on it, that were on set every day. And on average, there were some days that we had a little bit more and some days that we had a little bit less, but it was really, really tiny, small affair. And, we sent out this movie to a lot of companies, and nobody wanted it. And, but we decided to make it anyways. And we raised our money independently. And, I put some of my own money into it, that I've made over the years working as an editor and as a commercial director. But we just kind of kept it really small, kept the team really small, and just tried to do as much of the stuff ourselves as possible, and not really hire anybody unless we really had to.
Did you learn how to do things like animation and stuff like that in film school, or was it something kind of learned on the job too? It's probably
I
both.
honestly, most of what I've learned on YouTube in terms of visual effects tutorials and
Uh-huh.
animation and
Oh,
all
that's
of
so
that.
cool.
Yeah, I took a VFX class at NYU, but they teach it in a program called Nuke, which is very complicated. And if you want to be a professional VFX compositor, you need to learn the super complicated software. But I've never wanted to really be a professional VFX artist, and so we did everything inside After Effects, and and kind of more consumer friendly, prosumer, software. So,
Mhm.
um, you know, I am very grateful for NYU, and I learned a lot there, but I didn't necessarily focus on picking up a lot of those skills while I was there. So I think, there's so many great resources online of people that can teach you things, and it takes time to kind of sift through them and figure out who's good and who isn't. And sometimes there's bad tutorials out there too, that kind of can give you some bad habits. But if it's the information's all out there if you're willing to look for it.
Yeah. That's so cool. That in I love the way that the creative arts in so many different ways have become the elitism has been taken away in so many different ways these days,
Definitely.
that anybody with an idea and enough dedication and can get something made. It's really
100%.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love
definitely.
that.
No,
Yeah.
I spent the 7 years trying to get other people to give me some money to make the film and make a bigger version of it, and I just couldn't find the right partners. And so, it can't. I don't think I would have done this if I had another choice. But it
Yeah.
really came down to like, all right, we can do it, and we can do a lot of the work ourselves, and make the movie and make it the way that we want to make it, or we can not make the movie at all. And
Hmm.
so, ultimately, I'm very happy that we went forward and did it, but it was a ton of work. We
Oh yeah,
spent
no
a year and
question.
a half doing that up before we shot, and then 6 months, putting it all together afterwards. And, I really couldn't have done it without Zach, who was my kind of right hand guy on everything. And he also has a little bit more visual effects experience, so I learned a lot from him, and he was able to help kind of like design a bunch of these systems that we used, yeah.
I love the visual aesthetic to the whole piece. And I'm sure that was somewhat dictated by the budget, but the bright colors and the way that you use the lighting and it kind of reminded me of like a cross between Doctor Who and Tron. I don't know if that was
Yeah.
intentional, but it's kind of how it felt visually.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I have I have like a very wide range of influences. I honestly have not seen that much Doctor Who. I'm kind of behind on it, but from what I have seen, I do really like it. And um, Tron is definitely a huge influence. Like, we have a location in the movie that's kind of all in cyberspace, and
Yeah.
we went to Tron, and those 70s and 80s movies like Star Wars and Tron and Blade Runner, like all of them use practical effects. And, a lot of what they were going for was kind of at a higher budget level and higher kind of photorealism level than what we were kind of going for. But, you know, it's kind of crazy how access to a lot of this technology has kind of been democratized, and anybody can go learn how to do this stuff. And a lot of what we did was kind of taking some of those techniques and stuff from the 70s, where you needed to have a huge team of people, but now all of that technology is on your computer, and you can do it yourself at home if you want to.
Mhm. Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/hallmarkies. Was it fun to come up with sort of the space age props that you have, like the poo box and the glorp and the just stuff like that? Cyber
Definitely.
dating.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, that's one of my favorite parts of just like science fiction movies too, is little world building details that make it feel real, and stuff that kind of, is a fun, in-world joke. And that was also one of the benefits of spending this 18 months beforehand building everything, where, we built a miniature city, and then it was like, okay, well, what are the companies that have ads on these buildings? There's probably a soda company, because if you go to Times Square, there's always going to be a Coca-Cola ad there somewhere. So what's the Coca-Cola of this world? And, that's how we kind of came up with Glorp and Diet Glorp. And, that was something where we then, after we had come up with that, kind of just as a detail, it became part of the story. And oh, this character is then sponsored by Glorp, and it is kind of this background element that we're going to see in a bunch of different sides of the movie.
Yeah.
And and then it's fun also where it's like, I love fan merch and stuff like that. We have, Diet Glorp hats that are for sale online, and Diet Glorp t-shirts. And I think I'm, a big fan and nerd about other movies and TV shows. And I love, buying little things that are nods to a little inside joke within the world, and it's my dream to see someone walking down the street with a Diet Glorp hat.
Yeah. Now you have some sections that are like stop motion, or it looks like it's stop motion with the robots. And so what was that like doing that? That must have been very exhausting.
Yeah, so the stop motion sections were one of the only sections that like we hired outside animators to help us with, because stop motion animation is its own art form. It's
Sure.
really difficult. You cannot necessarily pick it up just, I'm sure you could learn how to do it on YouTube if you wanted to, but like that in itself would take a year and a half. And, that the stop motion elements, it's are kind of weaved throughout. Basically, we have these giant robots that are fighting each other throughout kind of the first half of the movie and then come back a little bit at the end. But all in all, it's only about 90 seconds worth of robot fighting. And, hopefully it feels bigger than that. And, but that 90 seconds took about 8 months for these two animators. One of them was based in South Korea and one of them was based in Connecticut. And I put together an animatic, which is kind of like, it's like a short video made up of other clips that kind of show the timing of what we're going for. And so I put together a 95-second animatic, and then we broke that up into specific shots, and then we sent that to the animators, and then they would animate the models in front of green screen, and then me and Zach built all the backgrounds, and then Zach did a lot of the final compositing. So that was one of the most collaborative parts of the process, where we had 5 or 6 different people working on just those sequences. And it was really fun and really cool. I mean, the animators were really talented, and I really loved working with them. And they're but it was also scary because I'd never done anything in stop motion. And, luckily I just, their names were Chris Rogers and Matt Manning. And they just did a really fantastic job.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So as the screenwriter, how did you decide kind of where we want the different chapters of the story to be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I look back at the original When Harry Met Sally, and if you look at that movie, about the first 30% of it is like they do like 3 main time jumps. They meet when they're coming out of college, then they meet about 5 years later, when they're kind of transitioning out of their quarter life crises, and then they meet again in their 30s, and then the rest of the movie happens in their 30s. And when you think about it, you're like, oh, it takes place over so much time, but really like the majority of the film is in that section in their 30s. And so I kind of knew I wanted to roughly follow that structure, although, in Molly and Max, like I think one thing that I was interested in that I wanted to do kind of differently from When Harry Met Sally was like to kind of circle back and have the characters explain the gaps in between the time periods. And so in our movie, it's like we have them meet when they're younger. It's never explicitly stated, but they're supposed to be about 18. And then again, when they're like 23, and then again, maybe when they're 29 or 30. And, but I wanted them to meet when they're 30 and then go through kind of the story of what happened between, 18 and 23, because I think part of catching up and reconnecting with old friends is telling them the stories of like where you've been and what you've been doing. And I think that is also a way that you connect with people is, by opening up and telling them, I went through this thing and it was really hard, and I learned something from it, and I'm not the same person I used to be. And so, the whole kind of script really started with Molly's flashback sequence, where I wanted to tell a story of a girl who got kind of involved in a toxic relationship and then kind of found her way out of it. And once I had that kind of starting chapter, I realized that it actually needed to be moved later, because I wanted to hear the story of how she met the person she was talking to and telling the story to. And then I wanted to hear his side of it too. And so, her flashback and when she joins the cult and kind of falls into this toxic relationship is the fourth chapter in the movie and is kind of right before the halfway point. But that was really the genesis of the idea. And then it was like, oh, well, how did this woman come to this, to go and make this decision? And then who is the guy that she's talking to that she's telling this to?
Well, that's interesting because I was going to ask when Harry Met Sally has like a big question that's asking, can men and women be friends? That's a big question. And there's different debate of does it answer that question satisfactorily? I don't know. But do you feel like this movie has a question that's asking?
It's interesting because like I think everybody thinks about when Harry Met Sally as the question of like, can men and women really be friends? And I think that's like almost like the marketing hook more so than the actual question, because I think that first of
I just
all,
think they wimp out. I think they wimp out at the end. I think if it was made today, I like to think that Nora Ephron and Rob Reiner would be a little braver. I think that as much as I love the movie, and I do, I even really love the ending, but I think that for asking that question, I think that the movie should be them being friends at the end. I think that's the kind of the braver and more authentic ending to the whole movie, and that sex got in the way for a little bit, but then we were still friends, and because they were such good friends, Rob Reiner and Nora Ephron, and so that's kind of how I feel, is like, oh, they just couldn't give that kind of a more bittersweet, I guess, or more complicated ending. They had to go with the more sort of traditional rom-com ending.
I feel like I read somewhere that originally they were going to kind of have them not be together, but then they rewrote it because their chemistry was so great. And I think ultimately, like, the movie turned out amazing, but I think that's why kind of Annie Hall is almost a better version of that can men and women be friends, like. But I think one of the things of like, how do you update when Harry Met Sally is like, everybody knows that's the central question of the original. And if you were to ask that question today, can men and women really be friends? It's like, well, duh, obviously. Like, I have lots of female friends that I'm not trying to sleep with. And to me, it's just like, well, yeah, that's not really that interesting of a question anymore. And like, maybe in the 90s when men didn't have any female friends or vice versa, like, it could be seen as like a hooky kind of way into it. But I'm like, in today's day and age, like, most of my close friends are female and they have lots of close friends that are male, and there isn't sexual tension, and life goes on. So I don't necessarily think I approach the story with kind of a central question. I think one of the I think the real question of when Harry Met Sally is what is the basis for a great romantic relationship? And the answer is friendship. And I think that so many romantic comedies don't necessarily understand that and think that it's about kind of solving an external circumstance of like, oh, well, if I get the promotion, then that will solve this problem or something, and I think one of the reasons why the original When Harry Met Sally works so well, and kind of the key to all great rom-coms, is that you really believe that they know each other by the end of the movie, and that they've seen multiple sides of one another, and that you believe that they belong together despite their differences, because you've seen them at different stages in their lives. You've seen the way that they act around one another. You've seen the effect that they had, and you've seen them with a bunch of bad partners that don't, do the same thing that they do for each other. And so, that was really, I think, the core of When Harry Met Sally that I did want to keep, which is that I think the basis of a great romantic relationship is that friendship, and that is what kind of sets you up for success.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Jen Johans, host of the podcast Watch with Jen, which delivers a steady stream of great movie recommendations, thoughtful career deep dives, and first-rate conversations with film critics, authors, actors, journalists, filmmakers, and more. You can find Watch with Jen wherever you get your podcasts, or hear us first at our Patreon at patreon.com/filmintuition.
How did you decide on your two leads, Zoja? if I'm saying that right.
Zasha.
Zasha, sorry.
Yeah,
Zasha
everyone.
and Aristotle. How did you decide with them for Molly and Max?
I'd seen Zasha in Girls and The Flight Attendant, and I'd just been a fan of her work for a very long time. And she has such a unique voice, and she brings her personality to everything, but she also is like such a fantastic actor and has so much range, and she's just very naturally funny. And I think I wanted, especially, I wanted both of the characters to have a natural sense of humor to them. And because I think that's one of the killers of a romantic comedy is that, they'll cast somebody who might be attractive, but just doesn't have that kind of charm to them. And she has that. She's very friendly and relatable, both in real life and in the movie. And I think that Molly as a character is someone who's like a little bit abrasive, and she's very kind of aggressive, and she says what she thinks all the time. And if you have someone who doesn't have that natural charisma, it could come off as very annoying. And so it was important to me to find somebody who just had that kind of zest for life and really understood what the movie was. And as far as I know, like Zasha hasn't done a ton of science fiction or horror or fantasy or stuff like that. Like a lot of what she does is kind of more based in reality. But I think this movie is not just for people who only like science fiction or fantasy. It's ideally people who really just like great characters and like a cool world. So that's how I, it's why I wanted to work with Zasha. And then Aristotle was on Saturday Night Live for a season, and that's how I originally found him. But he started off as a stand-up, and he's been doing stand-up for years. And so he was also in the sketch comedy group on Comedy Central called Goat Face. And he just has an insane range where he can do these crazy characters, but he can also play kind of a grounded, normal guy, but kind of bring his kind of unique quirk to it. And so I met with him, and it's also really important to me that I work with people that are nice, because life is short and making an independent film is really difficult, and it's fun and really rewarding in many ways, but it's also very unglamorous in other ways. And it can be very grueling and tiring and difficult. And you need somebody who's like a team player who wants to be there, who isn't just doing it because their agent told them it was a good idea or something, And so with both of them, I met with them and talked about it, and just made sure that we were all kind of on the same page about wanting to make the same movie, and that we were all doing it for the right reasons. And they both were just like such lovely, nice, kind people, and it just, I think, makes the working environment so much more fun for everybody, including the crew. And I get better work out of people when I enjoy their company and they enjoy mine.
Especially for a movie like this, like you really need that. Did you do like a chemistry read between the two of them?
I did not. No, you kind of jump into the deep end, and you kind of trust that they have enough experience under their belt that they're gonna be able to do it. But and they both did have so many samples of their work beforehand. But we did 5 days of rehearsal, and so we had a chance to kind of get to know one another. And I really like rehearsing because you just kind of find out the way that people work, and you see kind of what what are their instincts, and what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what are, how do you want to work with them specifically? How do they work with other people? And, how that was a really informative 5 days. And we kind of split it out over a couple of weeks where we did like 1 or 2 days a week. And then we do 1 or 2 days the next week. And in between those sessions, I'd go home and rewrite the scene. And so we would read through a scene together, and it's like a very low pressure environment because you don't have somebody breathing down your neck. And so, you can go into that rehearsal, and you can be like, let's read through this scene. And then, if you were shooting it on the day, somebody might be like, there's no time to talk about what I think is wrong with this scene or how we could make it better. You just have to go and do it. Whereas when you're in rehearsal, you can read it, and then you can be like, I think something's off about this last line. And then you're giving, your actors space to be like, what if I said this instead? Or, I think the reason it's not 100% working is because it feels this way. And what if we tried it this way? And kind of having that back and forth, and then being able to go home, rewrite the scene, come back a couple days later, have them reread it. And then everybody's like, yeah, that works way better. And then you're involving them in the process, and you're kind of tailoring things to them and what their strengths are, and figuring out what are the jokes that they like to make, and how do they like to deliver it, and Because if you write, something that is a certain style and then you give it to an actor who that's not their natural way of talking, and you try to force them into that box, like it's not gonna work. And so you have to always kind of adapt what you're doing to what your collaborators, what their instincts and what their strengths are.
It was such a green screen film. Is it hard as a director, and then also with the actors helping to keep an idea of kind of, okay, this is what it's eventually going to look like. This is what's going to be in this scene. This is where you're going to be sitting. This is where you're going to be like, is it hard to keep that vision?
It is. I mean, because we had spent that 18 months beforehand kind of building everything, we had photos of like what every scene was. And so the first week we actually, we shot on a giant LED stage, which is, what they shoot like Star Wars on these days, where it's essentially a giant TV screen. And so we could put the image from the movie up on that background and then
so they can see it.
Yeah. And so for that whole first week, like they could see exactly where they were. And then the last 3 weeks of shooting, we were on a normal stage, and but we still did a lot of rear screen projection. And so, it's the same thing as an LED screen, but instead of a TV screen behind them, it's a projector behind them. And so we used that for about 30% of the movie, and then the last 30% was green screen. So it was really a combination. And so 50 to 60% of the movie they could turn around and look and see where they were, and then the other 40% of the movie we had images of like, this is where you are, this is where you're standing. But it's always harder when you don't have something physical there, because as a director too, you want to be inside a physical space. It's less fun, I think, to shoot stuff on green screen, but sometimes it's just what's necessary. And I think that's also an important part of like Zasha and Ari, where like it is less fun to shoot those things, and you need actors that are like down to do that as well, because a lot of actors are sick of shooting on green screens.
A lot of times people hear, oh, green screen, they're like, oh, because a lot of times it just looks terrible, but I think in this case it's different, as that it's part of the visual aesthetic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we from early on, part of the kind of big idea visually is like, we're not trying to compete with Marvel movies. We're not trying to compete with the latest Christopher Nolan film. Like, those are $300 million movies, and we're never going to make
even those like that. But even those, like, it's supposed to be realistic. So when it's supposed to look like a real world, right? And so when you see the green screen, it's like, oh, it looks terrible. Whereas this, it's not supposed to look realistic. It's all part of the aesthetic.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing, is we weren't trying to make it look realistic. We're trying to make it look cool. We're trying to make it look stylized. And I think that helps too in a way subconsciously, because if you're told that everything you're supposed to be looking at is supposed to be realistic, as soon as you see one thing that doesn't look 100% realistic, the illusion is broken.
Yeah.
And with this, from the very first frame of the movie, you are ideally saying, oh, this isn't that type of movie. This is much more kind of like watching a Wes Anderson film or a Michel Gondry movie, something that is very obviously kind of fake, but still looks interesting and still looks cool. And, the goal and the hope is that people kind of suspend their disbelief and then just let themselves be taken over by the story.
Yeah, I think so. Where I got real like Doctor Who vibes was in some of the makeup and hair, particularly in the different like gods, in like the love god and in the whole game section.
Definitely,
there was that character, and so what was that like working with your makeup and doing all that?
Yeah, I mean, we had a really amazing hair and makeup team led by Sarah Plata and Samson Smith, and they were incredible. I mean, the amount that they pulled off with just the two of them was kind of insane, because they had to do, and a lot of our schedule was kind of built around the fact that, like, putting Mobius into that alien makeup is going to take 4 or 5 hours, or putting another character into hair and makeup is going to take a couple of hours. So how do we kind of build what we're shooting around making sure that we can get the makeup up to snuff, and they were just really amazing. I mean, I think it's just fun, and keeping that stuff practical is always the best kind of option. And I think it is a great way to just kind of make the world more specific and unique and weirder.
Mm-hmm. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
Is it hard sometimes to have sort of confidence in your script? Like, I would think that especially certain things like that you have Schrodinger cat world with like an actual giant cat, like things like that. Do you think, because I would worry about that with comedy. It's just like you write it and then you hear it again and again and again and again and again. And it's like, oh, is it really funny? Because I don't know, I feel like you become kind of numb to the jokes.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, that is often when I rely on my collaborators too, is that like I'll have read a joke 20 times. And then when I get into rehearsals, I'll read it in front of Zasha and Ari. And, there are different types of jokes, and some jokes are laugh out loud and other ones are kind of more of a smile. And sometimes it's been interesting always afterwards when you think, you think, oh my God, this joke is going to get an amazing laugh. And and you look around and people are smiling, but they aren't laughing out loud, or vice versa, where you're like, oh, that joke's not that good. And then it gets a huge laugh and you're like, oh my God, what that one got the huge laugh.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always a process, but part of it is like, I'll read a joke and Zasha and Ari will laugh at it, or I'll be like, I don't know if that joke's working, maybe we should cut it. And then one of them will be like, no, that one's really good. I really love that joke. And then, that also happens at other stages in the process too, where, once we're done shooting the movie, we're editing it, and the same thing, you watch something 20 times and then you're like, I don't know if that's that funny anymore. And then you show it to someone else and they love that, or they're like, you know what? No, you should cut that joke. And so there were definitely the cat is a specific example too of, I was like, I don't know if we need this. I don't know if we really need to have this joke right here. And then I don't remember who it was, but somebody stood up for it and was like, no, that's funny. You should do it. And ultimately, like, I find that it's better to kind of shoot it on set, and then you can decide later if you think it's really that funny and worth keeping. Because also, one of the joys of working with comedic actors is that sometimes you have a starting point for a joke and then they're able to find a way to sell it in a way that you didn't imagine, or that, they find something funny that's, that inspired them to find something even funnier. So I always try to kind of cast a wide net and then, bring it back in and cut it down and make it as lean as possible.
I really enjoyed the music in the movie. Was that must have been a daunting process?
Honestly, it was one of the most fun parts, and we had a really amazing composer named Alex Winkler, and the soundtrack to the movie is going to be on Spotify soon. And it was funny because I had seen, there was a show called Cowboy Bebop that was a famous anime show, famous sci-fi show, and they paired jazz with outer space. And so to me, I was like, oh, someone's already done that. I'm not doing anything like that ridiculous. And also, it's such a classic romantic comedy that all of the romantic comedies that inspired it have jazz inspired scores. And so I was like, oh, this is really obvious. And then it was funny, after, we screened the movie for some friends, they were like, when you told me it was going to be jazz, I thought that was a terrible idea, but now that I see it, it actually works really well. And I was like, well, why didn't you say something before? But so for me, I was like, I was never in doubt that was a good idea, but it was funny to hear that other people had their doubts. But yeah, Alex is a really amazing composer, and every single song in the movie is 100% original. And I feel like there are aspects of other departments that I have very strong opinions on sometimes, whether it's production design or cinematography or editing. And it's because I have a little bit more craft knowledge of it. And like, I grew up playing piano and guitar, and I know a lot of music theory, but like, I really think that I'm terrible at communicating what I want when it comes to the score. And Alex really was able to kind of read my mind and deliver stuff that was just so much better than I could have ever imagined. And there were a couple songs that you put in what's called like a temp score, where you kind of take a song from real life and you put it in there, and usually the song is too big to get. But we had a Chopin song, and you can get classical music, it's a little bit cheaper sometimes if it's been around for a very long time in the public domain. And so there were some songs where I was like, oh, we could just use this like pre-recorded song, and that'll make it less work for Alex, and it'll make I think this works really well. And then Alex would just go home and make an original song anyways, and then his original song would be better than the temp song that we had in there. And it was like, oh my god, yeah, let's use Alex's version. Awesome. And so yeah, he was really, really amazing.
Yeah. So when you found out you had gotten into South by Southwest, you must have freaked out.
Yeah, it really was a dream come true. And I'd been making short films for almost 12 years, and it's really, really difficult to get into those festivals. And even if you've gotten into them before, it's not always a guarantee. And so South by Southwest was really my dream spot to premiere, for a small genre film. Yeah. I think it's like the best place you could go. And so I was extremely happy, and I think filmmaking is really tough, and you really appreciate your wins and think back to moments that inspire you. And I do really remember the moment that we got in, and the anticipation leading up to it was torture. But when I'm frustrated about things, I think back to that, and I'm like, oh, that's what makes it worth it to be able to be part of these things.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that the other day, that it's just, as a freelance critic and podcaster, it's tough. It's scary. You don't know where your next sponsorship or deal or a project, or if something will take off or if it'll totally bomb. It feels like a big crapshoot 99% of the time. And so when you have those wins, you need to celebrate them.
100%. Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also a matter of kind of defining what success is for you, and making sure that you're taking enjoyment in the project itself and the process of making stuff, because you can't ever really tell what the response is going to be, and you can't ever count on that kind of stuff. So you have to make sure that you're at least enjoying the work itself.
It's true. And that must have been a great time at the festival.
It was really fun. And, we had 25 people from the movie that kind of came out and were there for the film. And so it was really magical to be able to kind of celebrate it all with them. And, people put in so much time and energy, and everyone on this movie was paid much less than they would be if they had chosen a bigger movie to work on. And, when you ask people to do that, the hope is that their work is going to be, is going to get seen, and that they're going to get something out of it other than just financial reward, and ideally also some financial reward too. But it was really great to be able to take it to South by and have them see the product of their work and be able to celebrate it together. It
was my first time attending the festival in person. I covered it virtually. Cool. Yeah. So it was, and first time as press. So that was very exciting for me. And like I said, it was my favorite I saw, I think 23 films.
Wow.
At the festival.
Oh my God. Yeah. I'm so honored. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. And it's always an interesting thing to watch again films that you watch at the festival, because I try as hard as I can to be as objective as possible and be fair. But it's hard in the same breath. It's hard when when you have a 4-film day, or maybe even more, at Sundance, or Sundance coming up, and just next week is Sundance. And it can be hard to not, be a little tired or a little, and sometimes I'll watch things and be like, I was a little tired. I was a little tough on this. I was a little too. And then
Yeah.
I have ones where I'm like, I probably bought into the hype a little bit on
Yeah.
this. I try really hard not to, but I'll watch it. Maybe it wasn't that good, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
yeah,
it's interesting. I mean, that's one of the magical parts of a festival is that
yeah,
it's very rare in life that you see something and not know a single thing about it before going in.
yeah, that's true.
Maybe you've seen the still and the description, and that's what caused you to show up.
Yeah,
But most of the time,
that's
unless
true.
your friend is showing you a movie blind, like you usually have seen the trailer, you have some preconceived notions about whether or not other people like it or not. And so
Yeah.
I think festivals are always really interesting and a really unique place to see
Yeah.
films.
Yeah. And I'm like the worst at predicting what sort of the general consensus will be on films.
Yeah.
Don't listen to me because I am always wrong.
Well, I hope you're right about this one.
I hope so too. But like everything everywhere all at once, for example. Like I mean, I never in a million years would have thought that was gonna win Best Picture and was gonna be so. I mean, I liked it. I thought it was fun.
Yeah.
But I was like, this is sort of a weird movie, and it debuted to South by Southwest. And
Yeah.
I don't know, I just never would have thought that it would have that kind of legs. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's impossible to predict how audiences are going to react, but I mean, I think Everything Everywhere is like a really great example of like it is a super weird movie, and I love it, and but I'm really glad that it got that wide exposure, and
Yeah.
I think there are those movies that when you grow up and you only are seeing a certain type of movie in theaters, and then something like that comes out, and it can really kind of change the way you see movies, and
Yeah.
there I think that's really amazing and awesome that I know for a fact that people have seen that movie and then they said, I didn't know a movie could be like this. And then they go and they try to find other movies that are like that. And, that I think is super cool. And, hopefully
Yeah.
that movie inspires someone to go find, what else is there out there that's
Mhm.
kind of like this. And, we were
Yeah.
fortunate that we had a couple reviews like compare us to them. And we're obviously not going to be, nominated for Best Picture, but I think if it can inspire people to expand their taste a little bit, then that's a huge win.
Definitely. Yeah, and I got to give the Academy credit. I mean, lately they have been picking, as far as Best Picture, picking really quirky, independent, films. I mean, we've had No Man Land and Parasite
Yeah.
and Coda and Everything All at Once. Like, and your Avatars and your Top Gun Mavericks and your things like aren't winning, which is just very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's great.
Yeah.
I'm all for that, more like diversity and stories and styles and people in front of and behind the camera. So yeah.
Well, I'm really excited for people to get a chance to see it. It's going to be a lot of fun. But we like to end our interviews with some fun get to know you questions.
Sure.
So first question, what is the best ice cream flavor?
Ooh, good question. Mint chip. I'm a mint chip guy.
Okay,
I love that refreshing mint flavor.
What's your favorite color?
Probably blue.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. There's so much blue in the movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of blue.
Yeah. What music are you into right now?
I really love Future Islands. They're coming out with a new album in a couple of days, and I listened to some of the singles on it. And I love Future Islands. I've been getting really into Casey Musgraves. I love her. She's great. Lake Street Dive. I listen to a lot of like movie soundtracks. My next movie is going to be a Western, and so I've been listening to a lot of like old school saloon jazz, which is very specific, like ragtime music. And Greta Van Fleet is also kind of on that Western playlist, even though I don't know if they're super Western, but they remind me of like Led Zeppelin in a really cool way.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good. What is your go-to date night food?
Am I staying at home or am I going out to dinner?
Going out.
Going out. My wife comes from an Italian American family, and so we love just like going out for a good Italian food dinner. But there's a place in Brooklyn called Miss Ada, which we love, and that's like Mediterranean. And their baba ganoush is incredible.
Oh, that sounds good. What is your go-to date night activity if you're going out and doing something?
I mean, we just love going to the movies. I mean,
Mm,
we're total suckers. There's a reason we both work in film and TV, and
yeah,
so we'll always, try to see a movie in theaters if we
yeah,
can. We also love going out to music shows. So that is, one of our big joys is just going to see a movie in a theater.
yeah. We always say in this podcast that if you're going to do the movie date, though, you should do movie and then dinner, not dinner and movie,
Oh,
because then you can
interesting.
talk about the movie at dinner.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's a very good point. I mean, we're spoiled and we go to Alamo and they often
Oh,
have, the
yeah.
food there. So, but we usually,
Did they have
can
one of
still
those in
talk
New
about.
York? I didn't even know.
They do, yeah. And they
Oh,
have two, one in Brooklyn, one in
oh,
Manhattan.
okay. Cool. Good. All right. Which do you like better, dogs or cats?
I'm a dog person. I got a
Oh,
dog.
okay.
But I do love cats too. I'm not
Yeah.
anti-cat.
Okay. Which do you like better, beaches or mountains?
Beaches, definitely. I grew up in LA and I'm a
Mm,
surfer. So I love
cool.
going to the beach and being in the water.
What's your favorite holiday to celebrate?
I love Halloween. I mean, I just love how everybody gets dressed up and you always
Mm-hmm.
see some incredibly clever, creative costumes and it's
Mm-hmm.
just a good time.
Do you have any legendary costumes, your favorites?
Um, my wife and I dressed up as the squids from Arrival one year.
Yeah. Yes.
Abbott and Costello. That was really silly and fun.
I
Um,
always say it's the main reason to get married is to have somebody do couples costumes with.
exactly, exactly. And then we dressed up from the Matrix
Uh-huh. Yes.
with our
Agents.
dog. No, so I was the blue pill and she
Oh.
was the red pill, and then our dog was Neo, and we put sunglasses on our dog, and like a black turtleneck.
That's
So
funny.
it was very silly but very cute.
That's great. That's great. All right, last question. What is your favorite Hallmark or romantic movie? I think you already said it earlier, but
I mean, I love When Harry Met Sally.
yeah,
It's,
when Harry Met
it
Sally.
really is one of my favorites. And I also really love the Before trilogy.
Mm,
I think those are just really fantastic, unique movies. And Annie Hall too is just that was
hmm
one of my first like favorite movies ever. So
hmm
it has a special place in my heart.
Yeah. Well, very good. Did I answered all the questions?
Yay.
Thank you
Thank
so
you for
much for coming on and talking with
thank you
us.
for having me. I had such a great time. This was really fun and
Yeah.
thank you again for helping us get the word out about the movie.
Yeah. So if people want to watch the movie, what's the release going to be like?
So it will be in theaters on February 9th. So it'll be in theaters around the country. We're still getting the final list, but check your local movie theater, check mollyandmax.com. That's MOLLI and max.com. And follow us on social media where we'll be posting about where it's playing and where you can go see it. And then it should be on video on demand in March as well. So if you don't catch it in theaters, catch it then. But try to go see it in theaters. I think it's a
Yeah.
really good big screen movie.
Yeah, definitely. I look forward to seeing it again. And thanks again. If people want to follow you on social media, how do they do that?
So it's just my name, Michael Litwak at MICHAEL LITWAK.
Great.
So I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter, but I don't really use it. And I just joined TikTok, and we're going to be releasing a bunch of behind the scenes videos that kind of talk about how we made the movie and give some insight into all of the model making and miniatures and compositing and so yeah, check us
Awesome.
out on social
Awesome.
media.
Very good. Well, congratulations on the
Thanks
film. It's
again.
very exciting.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
I'd like to thank Michael for coming on the podcast. This was so interesting to he just get the behind the scenes of a movie and all the different aspects and the special effects and stuff like that we don't tend to talk about as much on Hallmark movies. So I hope you all enjoyed it and hope you'll check out the film Molly and Max in the future. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So check that out. Also, make sure you're following the podcast, Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews, 5 stars. It really helps us a lot. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. We also have our Patreon group, which is a ton of fun and the best way you can support us. And we have a merch store where you can get tons of fun movie inspired merch at the merch store and Hallmark inspired. Please take a look at that. And thanks again to Michael, and we'll talk to y'all later. Bye.